Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe.
Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe.
Utupe leo chakula chetu, tunachohitaji utusamehe makosa yetu, maana sisi tunawasamehe wale yotukosea, usitutie katika majaribu, lakini utuokoe na yule mwovu milele. Chakula chetu tunachohitaji utusamehe makosa yetu.
Warm greetings to everyone that is joining us today from across Africa and beyond. I trust we've all had a very, very good Africa month. My name is Monja Nganjo, and I'm the head of communications at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, which is based in Cape Town. It is a profound privilege, actually, to welcome you to this important conversation as we reflect on the theme, the role of culture in shaping positive societal transformation. Africa Day is always a moment for both remembrance and vision. It's a time to celebrate our unity, our diversity, and also a time to recommit ourselves to the journey that we're on, that of building peaceful, inclusive, and culturally vibrant societies. But today, dear friends, joining us from across the continent, it is rather saddening to hear that we've lost one of Africa's greatest. So even as we gather to celebrate, we do so with heavy hearts, because we've just learned of the passing of Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, one of Africa's most brilliant literary minds, academics, and writers, and one of our greatest cultural giants that's ever lived. Nonetheless, his influence is immeasurable. And through his writing, his scholarship, as well as his activism, Ngugi challenged the colonial legacy embedded in language, in culture, and education. And he dared us to reimagine a better Africa that speaks in its own voice and dreams in its own mother tongue. His passing is a monumental loss, but it also reminds us as to why we're here today. Culture is not ornamental, my dear friends. It is political, and it is also the lifeblood of our identity, our dignity, and our transformation. It paves the way for the way healing happens and also the way our communities evolve. As we embark on today's discussion, we will hear from remarkable individuals who've joined us this afternoon from Southern Africa. It could be morning from where you are or you're joining us from. So we've got remarkable lineup of individuals who are working at the intersection of culture, justice, memory, as well as change. Together, my dear friends, we're going to explore how cultural practices, language, storytelling, and creative expression can shape the Africa that we long to see, an Africa of belonging, of peace and possibility. I look forward to walking this journey with you throughout the session today. And once again, I welcome you warmly and invite you to engage, reflect, and contribute to what promises to be a rich and meaningful dialogue. Well, I'll just briefly go through the lineup for us this afternoon. Soon after, we'll hear on the Africa Day message from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Unfortunately, our executive director, Professor Cheryl Hendricks, will be joining us a little later, but her message will be read on her behalf by the head of Peace Building Interventions at IGR, Professor Tim Murithi. Thereafter, we're privileged to have our guest speaker from ECOSOC, Dr. Raj Chintaram. And ladies and gentlemen, Africa Day cannot be Africa Day without celebration and entertainment. We're going to have a piece from Lisedi Mafura, one of our continent's best talents ever. And we'll have an engaging panel discussion that explores Africa's journey of unity and the role of culture in positive societal transformation. That session will explore the link between culture and social justice. It will be moderated by the Deputy Executive Director of the IJR, Dr. Elijah Masubelele. And the panelists are Dr. Hesfina Rukato, Crisis Action Africa Director and former Deputy Chief of Staff at the African Union Commission. And that panel will also consist of Ms. Hakima Haidar. She's currently Acting Regional Director for the Jesuit Refugee Service in Southern Africa, as well as Ms. Tapela Memory Banda, founder of Zambian Albinism Matters Organization. We will then have a musical interlude by, of course, another great and artist in Africa, Wandile Mbabeni, who will give us some rhythms of Africa. And then we'll also be joined soon after. We're going to go into a session that I've been looking forward to since the time of our planning started for this event. We're going to have a session on amplifying African stories. What does that entail? And to unpack that for us, we've got Marcelo Mutana. She's a performing artist, also known as the Vocal Museum, and she's also a vocal historian. Marcelo will be joined by Leslie Lee Kasumba, the media personality and founder of She Speaks Africa, a woman I've known for a number of years now. We'll then have an interlude by Marcelo Mutana, our performing artist and vocal museum. And to give us a reflection on Africa Day will be Professor Tim Murithi, Head of Peace Building Interventions. And thereafter, my colleague Kezia Abrahams will moderate the Q&A discussion. And of course, now we take a broader lens by going into the diaspora. We're going to hear from Africans living off the continent through a short film on their experiences of African culture and identity. And of course, we'll have another musical interlude. And to give us a closing will be Elijah Masubelele. And thereafter, another cultural performance by Lesedi. Professor Tim, I hope you're ready to give us a message from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation on behalf of our Executive Director, Cheryl Hendricks. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Mwanja, and greetings to everyone. My name is Professor Tim Murithi, head of the IJR Peacebuilding Interventions Program. Let me welcome you all and also thank the IJR team that has been working on this behind the scenes, and also for that uplifting video showcasing Africa, the African continent in all of its majestic glory. So I'll be reading this opening statement on behalf of Professor Cheryl Hendricks, who is unable to be with us at this moment. And she has shared with me her ideas on the role of culture in shaping positive societal transformation. Let me also thank those who are joining us, our esteemed speakers, Dr. Raj at ECOSOC, Dr. Hesfina Rukato at Crisis Action, Ms. Hakima, the Jesuit Refugee Service, Mr. Pella at the Zambian Albinism Matters Organization, all of our guest speakers and artists, and our esteemed participants and colleagues and friends, thank you very much for joining us for this IJR Africa Day celebration. We definitely are in Africa and we try our best to ensure that we celebrate Africa Day every single year. And it is a major highlight on our calendar of events. So this is in fact the second of our Africa Day celebrations for this month, indicating our desire to showcase and to ensure that we spread the word widely that Africa is indeed a vibrant place and has a lot of hope and aspiration going forward. We're very excited about this theme in terms of shaping societal transformation through culture, because it really talks to the issue of how we transform our mindsets and how we draw upon our rich cultural heritage and innovative cultural wealth and diversity to also enable us to build a better Africa and a better world for all the people across our planet. Africa Day, it remains a very significant day for the continent. It is marked as a day of our liberation. As you know, we've had multiple struggles through slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and we continue even to this day to struggle for justice, peace, and equality and prosperity for all Africans. And it's also a call to action to show solidarity with all of those who are still subjected to violence and oppression across our continent, but also around the world. So today we are celebrating our culture and the achievements that we have that we have managed to undertake. We're also trying to revive the spirit of unity, solidarity, justice, and dignity for all. And so this is the key message for this Africa Day. And the key point is we cannot really truly develop ourselves unless we draw quite extensively from culture, which shapes the way we think, how we hold our values and beliefs, how we conduct our politics, economics, and our society. Culture really defines who we are and where we want to go, and therefore it is also our source of identity and our source of innovation and creativity. The African liberators who have been working, since the continent has always been subjected to external, intervention, have always spoken about the importance of promoting the spirit of Pan-Africanism from luminaries such as Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana, Sheikh Anta Diop, the prolific writer, to even Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who we've sadly heard has just passed away, a cultural and literary giant, and may his soul rest in peace. Ngugi taught us that language is inseparable from culture and identity, and the use of the colonizer's language has its limits and imposes a certain mind frame and on us as Africans. And therefore, we have to also be proud of our culture and our languages across our glorious continent. And we have to continue to work on this process that is called decolonizing the mind, using our language and indigenous cultures to uplift us and to also celebrate, our Pan-Africanism as a basis to integrate our continent and also to bring all of our peoples together. So the African continent has a very rich tradition of theater, storytelling, dance, music, and these are always very effective at showcasing and exposing the conditions of our existence and our continuing struggles for liberation and instilling a sense of pride in us as Africans. And some of those on this platform are key proponents of this. And so Pan-Africanism in this sense must bring us all together, and we must all celebrate, yes, the establishment of the OAU initially, now the African Union, which we need to also work with together to promote a much more integrated continent. The AU has a charter on culture, for example, which we need to popularize. And I'm glad to see Dr. Raj from ECOSOC joining us to showcase this issue and to highlight also the work that the African Union is doing. This year also we have the AU theme of the year, which is Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations, which is really a call for us to confront the past, both from an African perspective, but also from a European, North American perspective, to also showcase that African culture, was disrupted or interrupted by these exploitative systems that were brought to the continent. So as I conclude, let me just remind us all that, as artists, analysts, practitioners, we all have a responsibility to transmit our culture, social values, and education. But also we must encourage it to infuse our politics, our economics with these ideas. And we must be proud as Africans to beat the drums of our continent and to instill a sense of pride and dignity through the spirit of Ubuntu or Utu, if you are from Eastern Africa region, to drive our developmental processes, our evolution, our transformation through the role of culture. Ngugi wa Thiong'o did remind us that no night is so dark that it will not end in a dawn. So let us today begin to curate that Pan-African dawn. And I wish you all a happy Africa Day and look forward to the impressive lineup of speakers that will be coming. And I look forward to also engaging with you later in this celebration. Thank you. Mwanja.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for reading the message on behalf of Professor Cheryl Hendricks, the IJR's Executive Director. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our guest speaker from the ECOSOC, Dr. Raj Chintaram. Dr. Chintaram is a highly esteemed Mauritian professional with over 20 years of experience in project and NGO management. He is a nationally recognized social activist, climate advocate, and leadership coach known for pioneering youth and environmental initiatives. Raj also founded the African Network for Policy Research and Advocacy for Sustainability, a leading NGO in sustainable development. An academic and public speaker, Raj has advanced research in cultural and heritage tourism and delivered lectures globally, including on the 78th Peace Boat Voyage. He has led all major national initiatives pro bono and received multiple national accolades. With over 500 media features, Raj is known for his strategic thinking, public speaking, and leadership. Since 2020, he has served as desk officer at the ECOSOC, Secretariat of the African Union Commission in Zambia. Dr. Raj, we give the mic over to you.
Thank you, Director of Ceremony, Ms. Manja. So once they already mentioned that I have over 20 years of experience, so people will guess to know that I'm almost nearing my 50s. So thank you for revealing that one. But on a lighter joke, not a joke, but just allow me to appreciate the efforts of IGR. I still remember even that last year we received an invitation. I was in Cape Town, but sadly I had a change in my flight schedule. I had to leave. Otherwise, we would have joined you. And also, it's very, very difficult, to speak after such a learned speaker. Professor Timuroti is an elder brother to us, always as a technical expert, helping ECOSOC in advancing the cause of what we are doing, not only on reparative justice, but also on all the policy documents that we are working at the level of the African Union. So let me allow first and foremost to recognize all the participants on the call. the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, Professor Cheryl Hendricks. I know she will be joining us later on. So for extending the invitation and also for believing in ECOSOC, all our esteemed panelists, our elder sister, Dr. Heshpina Rukatu, who was the former Deputy Chief of Staff at the AU Commission, and all those who made the effort to have this Africa Day celebrations. So I extend the warm greetings from the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union. And it's also very welcoming for ECOSOC to witness the dedication and determination of African CSOs and think tanks to rally support for the commemoration of the Africa Day. It's my pleasure to deliver this statement on behalf of Mr. William Kiru, who is the head of the ECOSOC Secretariat. The team is actually now in New York. We have the Africa Dialogue series on the 8th theme of the year. And so that's why I'm representing him today. So coming back to Africa Day, it commemorates the birth of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, a bold step of our forefathers who took that shapes for shaping a prosperous and a united continent. Africa Day represents a monument to resilience. It reminds us of the hard-fought battles against colonialism and oppression. It honors the courage of generations who dared to dream of a free and a united Africa. Africa is a land of thousands of languages, breathtaking landscapes and cultures rich beyond measure. Africa Day is a joyous manifestation of diversity, a chance to share our music, our art, food, stories, and traditions, showcasing the incredible beauty born from our differences interwoven together. So IGL's chosen theme on the role of culture in shaping positive societal transformation is more than ever timely and much appreciated. Africa Day cuts across borders, reminding us that our shared history, challenges, and aspirations binds us far stronger than any division. By here, even the borders that we have, the artificial borders that separate the 55 member states of the African Union. Well, Africa Day is a day to commit to Pan-Africanism, solidarity, and lifting, supporting each other. But Africa Day isn't just about the past. It is the fuel, the hope for the future, a moment for us to reflect on our continent's incredible potentials, our youthful energy, abundant resources, and boundless innovation. Africa Day unites us to tackle our challenges together, from development to peace building, and actively shape an Africa of prosperity, justice, and opportunity for all. Celebrating Africa Day is an act of remembrance, an act of pride, of unity, and an act of purpose, thus reaffirming that our story, our culture, and our continent are invaluable. The African Union's landmark designation of the 2025 AU Theme of the Year, dedicated Justice for Africans and People of African Descent for Reparation, represents a revolutionary framework for addressing historical injustices. This initiative confronts legacy of transatlantic slavery, colonialism, and systemic racism that created enduring economic, social, and political disparities across generations. As articulated by the AU chairperson, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, during the 2025 Africa Day commemoration, the reparation theme honors historical suffering while asserting Africa's right to restoration and dignified futurity, refusing to be held hostage by the pain of its past. I think this is a very strong message that on behalf of ECOSOC and by extension the African Union that we are sharing with all the participants, that we are talking here about restoration and dignified futurity and refusing to be held hostage by the pain of its past. Crucially, the AU's approach transcends conventional financial compensation, advocating instead for comprehensive reparatory justice, encompassing mainly 5 key transformating dimensions. We have the legal redress, we have the economic restructuring, and we also have institutional reformation, we have historical truth-telling. Fifthly, we have the symbolic restitution, where we have formal apologies, the cultural artifact repatriation, and amongst others. Premise on the last dimension, which is symbolic restitution, it is worth exploring all the facets regarding cultural foundations of societal transformation. Culture is often considered as the bedrock of collective identity. Cultural systems function as invisible building blocks of societies, shaping worldwide worldviews, values, behaviors, and collective memory. Sustainable societal change emerges through interlocking transformations at personal, institutional, and systemic levels. As we celebrate Africa Day, we cannot remain indifferent to championing cultural restoration as reparatory justice. Centuries of colonial violence systematically targeted African knowledge systems, spiritual practices, and cultural heritage. Reparatory justice demands restitution of cultural artifacts, that is, returning looted treasures that embody civilizational memory, reevaluation of indigenous knowledge, which is elevating traditional, ecological, medical, and governance wisdom, linguistic revitalization, which is supporting endangered African languages as vessel of cultural anthology. I mean, just very quickly for me to elaborate on some of the cultural dimensions of cultural of reparatory justice. Just to know about some of the the colonial harm that have been done and possible reparative actions to be undertaken. I know the panel will be discussing about it, but then just to name a few, we have the erasure of identity, the cultural identity. So the action that can be taken is heritage education and program. The devaluation of indigenous knowledge. We know we all been talking about the Eurocentric education curricula. So we can now move to have an African-centered education curricula. So basically, there are many of the, I've tabulated many of the dimensions here, but in interest of time, I will not be elaborating on it, on all of them, but I will be very glad to share what I have on my in my speech. Well, just to continue with this statement, while celebrating Africa Day, this year, the main focus is on reparative justice. We do also need to place the African diaspora at the center of our deliberations. I'm very glad that Mwanja, you mentioned the diaspora, and you know ECOSOC has been championing the diaspora agenda for quite long, and we are pleased to inform you that in February 2025, at the 46th Executive Council of the African Union, they have African Union member states have adopted what they call the diaspora legal framework for engagement. So the full rollout of this framework is expected as early as 2026. And once it's rolled out, we will have 20 seats dedicated to diaspora in the General Assembly of ECOSOC. So these are deliberate efforts by ECOSOC and by the AU to have diaspora fully engaged in activities that we do. The AU explicitly recognizes the African diaspora as the sixth region of the Union, positioning them as critical stakeholders in cultural restoration. Diasporic communities maintain living cultural memory through first transatlantic cultural practices, be it music, be it religious systems, oral traditions, amongst others, global advocacy networks. So we say diaspora help us to leverage positions in Western societies to advance restitution claims, knowledge repatriation, returning archival materials and academic expertise to continental institutions. So the AU's 2025 team represents a paradigm shifting approach that positions cultural restoration as the cornerstone of decolonial justice. By addressing the psychic wounds of historical trauma while dismantling the structural remnants of colonial political economy, this framework transcends conventional human rights approaches. Its implementation demands unprecedented continental unity and global solidarity. Africa is strategically positioned with its youthful population, vast resources, and cultural resilience to model civilizational repair for the world. The cultural transformation embedded within reparatory justice promises not merely to rectify historical accounts, but to reimagine global relationships predicated on ethical reciprocity rather than racial hierarchy. The AU's bold thematic choice thus constitutes both a practical roadmap and a profound philosophical intervention in our understanding of justice, historical accountability, and shared human dignity. Reparations are not just about the past, they are about the future. A future where history is acknowledged, justice is served, and African people and Africans and people of African descent can thrive with dignity and equality in fulfillment of Africa, of the Africa we want. Before I end, allow me also to make an official announcement. It's now official. The 2025 ECOSOC Citizens Forum will be held from the 8th to 9th July in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. That will be just, on the margins of the AU Media Coordination meeting, which will now take place in Malabo. So the theme for the Citizens Forum is reimagining democracy and advancing reparatory justice, a new social contract. More information is available on our website and our digital platforms. So we invite IGR to join us on that platform, but also all other participants on this call. So that is another opportunity for us to join hands together to amplify our voices on this very important agenda. So with these few words, I again express my sincere appreciation to IGR for your sustained commitment to celebrating Africa Day, but also enshrining the principles of Pan-Africanism. So with this, thank you so much. And I leave the floor to you, my sister Mwanja.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Raj, for the opening remarks. And as guest speaker representing ECOSOC, we're enlightened and reminded once again that cultural restoration is part of repairing the injustices of the past, is part of restorative justice. So, and reparations, as you've reminded us, are not just about redressing the wrongs of the past, but also in building bridges for the future. Thank you very much for delivering the remarks on behalf of ECOSOC, Dr. Raj. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to remind you that we've got our chat that is open, or rather, can you please use the Q&A if any thoughts are already coming through to you on what you'd like to later on comment on, or for the various speakers and panelists to address as we go forward with our celebration this afternoon. So please make use of the Q&A, and my colleague Kezia will be able to engage with you a little bit more as we go along. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisedi, are you ready? Would love to hear from our talent on the continent. And Lisedi is going to give us a performance. Apologies, Lisedi. The music would not load on our end, so we'll just go to the performance the way you did it in our test session, if you don't mind. Lisedi, are you ready? Over to you.
I am ready. Thank you. Makura o molaba. Mabutlwe butlwe mothokotoko. Se oka dintja le malata. Basadi ba taboga ba re re batla go nyala ko Makhura re jana ba re tobetse ka legong. Ntitle ke tlarole ke kue ke goe go kue lerole. Ke batla go bua ka moganka o. He was a king and we are a forgotten kingdom. We are a nation clothed naked by mental slavery, scavengers, bloodsuckers, expropriators of land with compensation, please. Oh, please bring back our land. In fact, I erase the pleading part. For we have pleaded all our lives, pleading for peace that is piercing us apart. It is penetrating our pelvis, Lord, is turning us to pieces. Peace pertaining the pinnacles of pure purity. I am a woman of no peace. Don't you dare tell me about peace. I'm a woman in nude, clothed naked by the night, with the president on my side, Mr. President, and your greedy friends. Why do you kill us as residents? And whilst you answer that, bring back our land. Ke tla ba re nna bana ba, ke modidong pa itshetla. Ba ntshebile mo matlhong ba shebile gore ke tla ka sengwe sa go ja ke le mosetlha jaaka ke le mosetlha yana. A man of no dignity is a man without the land. O son of my soil and the guardian of this territory, if you sell your father's land to buy a trumpet, son, where will you stand to blow it? I want to sing. I want to shout. I want to chant. But give me the reason of why I should do that. At least sing songs to silence my shame. Beat, beat these drums to conquer my pain, and I will gain nothing. But the joy will be I have lived. And maybe, just maybe, an obituary will orbit my grief to say, but she has conquered the greatest, she fought a great fight, and she finished this race. My skin is black. Your soul is black. Yet his tomb is blank. There is nowhere to bury him. Please borrow me a land so that I can put his remains at rest. Makura o molaba, mabutle-butle mothoko-thoko, se oka dintja le malata. Basadi ba taboga ba re eng, ke batla go nyala ko Makhura ke ja nama ke tobetse ka lekoko. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Lisedi, for that moving tribute to Africa. Very powerful, heartfelt, and beautifully delivered. Your words painted the soul of Africa, its beauty, its complexity with such power and grace. Thank you for reminding us of the richness of our roots and our culture through the strength of our story and through poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to go into a panel discussion. As I said, it will be moderated by the IJR's Dr. Elijah Mesubelele, who is the Deputy Executive Director, and he'll be joined by Dr. Hesfina Rukato. Please turn on your cameras and your mics. He'll also be joined by Hakima Haida and Tapela Memory Banda. I'll just quickly give you a bit of a background on whom the panelists are. And oh, my apologies, I forgot to let you know that Lisedi, our poet, is actually an author as well. She is the author of Honeymoon, Honey Earth, Honey Fire, Honey Spirit, and Lisedi explores her love through the voice of an African religious woman. She's also founded Awoke in Words, a platform for young artists, and co-founded Queenship, Own Your Crown, to empower women through skills and entrepreneurship. Lisedi is involved in reviving community arts through the Merafong Creatives Market and has contributed to Love Letters to Merafong. Thank you very much, Lisedi, once again for that powerful poem. And we'll hear Lisedi's voice again towards the end of our celebration this afternoon. As I said, I'm going to introduce now the panelists that are going to speak to us on exploring how cultural expressions, heritage preservation, and creative industries can support justice initiatives and promote peace-building efforts across the continent, even as we look at the intersection of culture and societal transformation. Dr. Hesfina Rukato is Crisis Action Director. She is a renowned African development thinker whose research sits at the critical intersection of development, diplomacy, and conflict resolution. Her work has been instrumental in shaping innovative, African-centered approaches to sustainable peace and security. She is a prolific writer and thought leader, and her publications have made seminal contributions to policy frameworks that advance Africa's sustainable development agenda. Dr. Rukato has got a proven track record in development policy, strategic planning, program implementation, and she is a trusted advisor to governments, multilateral institutions, and civil society actors across the continent. Our other panelist is Hakima Haida. She is acting regional director for the Jesuit Refugee Services of Southern Africa and is part of the African Non-State Actors Platform on Migration Governance, co-leading on culture and narratives. She has consulted with the University of Witwatersrand's Mobility Governance Lab and a collaboration between Oxford University and the University of Witwatersrand. She further consulted with the Global Coalition on Migration, the African Union, and the United Nations Task Team on the Global Compact on Migration. She was previously the Regional Migration and Displacement Manager for Save the Children International. Hakima holds a postgraduate diploma in Public Development Management, as well as a Bachelor of Arts with honors in Migration Studies from Wits University. And we also have, as a panelist, Memory Tapela Banda. And I'm happy to note that she is a youth parliamentarian from Zambia, but she's also a 2024 NALA Fellow and a passionate Zambian human rights defender. She's a peace advocate and a disability rights champion. She is the founder of the Zambian Albinism Matters organization, inspired by her personal tragedy, as well as a commitment to building a safer, more inclusive societies. She's a trained mathematics teacher with a diploma in special education, and she's pursuing studies in education, peace, and security at the University of Zambia. And like I said, Memory serves as a SADC youth parliamentarian and holds several certifications in public policy, governance, and mediation. Ladies and gentlemen, she also represents her country on global platforms such as the African Union for Persons with Albinism. Through advocacy, education campaigns, and building a project for survivors of violence, she continues to fight for the rights and dignity of marginalized communities across Africa. Dr. Elijah, over to you with this befitting panel for our discussion this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mwanja, and thank you so much for a nicely put, biographies for our panelists. But before I get into it, let me also thank Dr. Raj for reminding us that culture is a bedrock of our identity. Sometimes we tend to forget that we are sometimes shy, in fact, at all times shaped by our own cultures. I also want to thank Lesedi for such a moving poem. And, she reminds us that in this world we are fighting and we have to fight a good fight and finish the race. So let me say wonderfully put there, and we really appreciate you guys. Colleagues, good afternoon to all of you and our fellow Africans out there. Today we gather not just for another discussion, but for a meaningful exploration of culture and its power to shape transformation across the African continent. However, before we get into that, I would like to take this moment to honor the passing of a great giant in African literature and thought, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who left us just yesterday. Professor Ngugi was more than just an academic, He was a cultural freedom fighter who reminded us that a language, heritage, and storytelling are the heart of our liberation. I remember his quote when he said, "Language as culture is collective memory bank of a people's experience in history." Now, today, those words or his words serve as both a mirror and a map for us. And let us not forget that they remind us that reclaiming and preserving our cultural identity is not just a nostalgic act, but a transformational one. It is about shaping how we heal, how we lead, and how we grow on our own terms as Africans. May his soul rest in peace. Now, to help me or to help us unpack this rich, complex topic, we are joined by three phenomenal panelists, each of them bringing a unique voice and perspective. I want you to listen with care, and I want you to allow me to introduce our panelists as follows. We've got Ms. Hakima Haidar, who will help us unpack the foundational question: what is culture, and how does it help with creating a positive transformation in the African context? And then we've got Dr. Esfina Rukato, who brings her depth of insight to the topic of Africa's cultural identity and how that identity contributes to transformation, or perhaps even hinders it in certain ways. And finally, we've got Ms. Memory Tapela Banda, a very powerful voice for youth and gender equity, who will speak on how young people can take the lead in preserving and promoting African culture in a modern, globalized world. Now, colleagues, these are not just panelists. You know, they are storytellers. They are truth holders and change agents. And I have no doubt that their contributions will leave us all challenged this afternoon, inspired and more committed to anchoring us Africa's future in the strength of its cultural roots. So I want you to take a moment to lean in with open hearts, critical minds, and a shared belief that African culture is not behind us. It is the foundation beneath us and the fire ahead of us. Now, without wasting time, I want us to welcome Ms. Hakima. Is she ready? Ms. Hakima, are you ready for us?
Yes, I am. Can you see my
Yeah, so I
screen?
think what I want you to do for us, Ms. Hakima, this afternoon, I want you to take us into the landscape of what is culture and how does it help with creating a positive transformation in the African context.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Elijah. So I've put up my screen. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I basically thought of like, in terms of addressing this question and understanding it, was first to go backwards and then go forward ultimately. So initially, just to start with, what is culture? How do we understand culture? A lot of the time when people hear culture and they think African culture, they think it's just music and dancing and that's it. But it encompasses much more than that. And I found this really nice definition of it, which I have on the screen that I'll explain just now. And then I thought after that, we could go into the past. What's our past culture? Where do we come from? Where does our heritage stand? And then coming into the present, and then ending with just some recommendations in terms of the future and what we need to do as Africans to come together and basically appreciate our culture and appreciate who we are and basically move into the future in a more dignified way. So in terms of culture and the definition that I came up with or that I found was the shared belief, values, tradition, and practices of a group of people passed down through generations. It's complex, it's evolving. As we know, nothing is stagnant, everything moves on. And that shapes how people think, behave, and interact within a society. And then it also encompasses both material and spiritual aspects. I think this bit is always forgotten about as well. So I thought this was quite a good definition in terms of that, and including everything from social norms and kingship systems to art, music, and cosmology. So I thought this was a very deep, rich definition in terms of what culture is and how basically we interact with it, and also what it is for us and what it means. And then I thought, in terms of taking us backwards, I think this we forget a lot about most of the time because we focus so much on our post-colonial period that we forget that pre-colonial period, we were a great nation. We basically were the people who had Timbuktu, one of the oldest universities, which is the picture on your far left. And then we had the Benin Wall. Again, most of us don't hear about this. We're not taught about this. We have no idea. So we kind of lose our heritage. We lose our culture. We lose where we came from. And we basically define ourselves a lot of the time through the pre-colonial era and pre-colonial lens. And then at the bottom, I have the Great Zimbabwe Wall. I think some of us might know more about that. And then also the Sphinx in Egypt. So we have heard about, I guess, or a lot of the time we do get taught about the pyramids, but then not the rest as well. So the continent is more than just that. And basically this is where we come from. We come from great people. We come from great creators. And basically, if you could even see in terms of the geometry of the Benin Wall, in terms of how it's basically rooted in nature, in terms of how it's been aligned. So the alignment was basically to nature, whereby you see development post-colonial, basically, it's like we're going against nature and we have issues around climate change. So it's like we're not settled within, which is what we used to do in the past in terms of everything that's created. And then the last picture in the corner is the Benin bronze, which I think that also some people have heard about because they've started returning them. But again, if you look at that and like the beauty of that and the creation of that, that's all things we forget. That's us. This is our past that I feel that most of us have forgotten up, and especially as the generations come along, we forget about that. And you hear people talking about, oh, actually, what are Africans and what have you. And we've taken in the savage, the barbaric narrative of Africa, which isn't what Africa is. So I just thought we should go backwards. And in terms of like answering the question, I said why it's important for Africa's development. I said it shapes our identity, our sense of being, and it's our forgotten history. So I think the forgotten history is what we need to bring in, because I think that's what the issue is. And then I put a quote there by Marcus Garvey, which says, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." And you can see that's kind of what makes us basically go everywhere, because we're not rooted in who we are and where we come from. And then I thought in the next slide, which I think the other two speakers like touched on, was the AU year of reparation. This was just brought basically to bring us to the present in terms of what are we doing as a continent when it comes to the injustices of the past. So as was mentioned by the other two speakers, was 2025 is a year of reparations and justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. I have a few of the objectives that I've put on the screen, but of course you can go into their website and get more details in terms of how we can engage, how can we be part of this? And in terms of reparations and reparations for Africa, you constantly hear when people talk about slavery and Africans talk about slavery, or we need reparation, you hear, oh, that was in the past, or that was long ago. And then you hear about apartheid. You even have people saying, ah, please let that go. It's in the past, but it's not in the past. Like injustice is injustice. And if somebody doesn't pay for the injustice, it continues to happen. When we say never again doesn't happen if we forget about something. You can't harm and then forget that you harmed, or you want to erase that you harmed. So this is quite a good initiative by the AU, and it would be good if other governments could also take this up as well. I think that's the idea in terms of from the AU level to the national level, but it would be good if actually at all levels that this really comes out. And then basically you can see from all the advocacy that's being done, the more discussions that are happening, finally we're hearing a few words of people recognizing that what was done to the continent was wrong. I have a quote there by Monika Groters from the German Cultural Ministry. This was in 2021, where she says, "We want to contribute to a common understanding and reconciliation with the descendants of the people who were robbed." And that's a good word, because it was a robbery, robbed of their cultural treasures during the times of colonialism. This is one of a 27-piece set that it's the last piece that was basically delivered in 2025, May 2025. It's the Katakle, a three-legged stool, and it dates back to the Kingdom of Domi, which was founded in the 17th century off the coast of modern-day Benin. And if you see, like, these artifacts aren't artifacts on their own. They had symbolic resonance as well. So you see with this one, it says during official ceremonies to symbolize stability, power, and unity. So I think sometimes we forget that our forefathers had basically thought through everything, and we were much more stronger as people, much more dignified. And I think with colonialism, we've lost a lot of that, and we have to basically get it all back, or at least start teaching it, if nothing else. And then I thought on my last screen, this was the way forward in terms of what do we need to do? What does Africa need to do to reclaim its culture? The first one I said was decolonize. And I think we keep talking about decolonization, but I think we don't realize that we haven't decolonized as a continent ultimately, because our education is still not African. Our universities, what we learn is still not African. Our monuments, the street names, we still don't have our African leaders' names on the streets. And every time there's a discussion about it, there's a lot of pushback and a lot of basically pushback from people and some people you hear saying, "Oh, but why, it's the past, let's let it go." But it's not. It's the memory that people want us to forget, and we shouldn't forget our greatness ultimately. And that's why we need to ensure this. So education is key in terms of educating our citizens on our history, where we come from, who we are, studying African history in schools, read about great African leaders, name our streets and monuments of our great leaders, study African scholars. This is also at university level, because a lot of the time you can go all the way up to university, leave, but all your examples, all the papers you've ever read, everything that was ever created is white. So we always have this white lens, and we don't really, we're like, oh, he went all the way, he did a PhD, but everything, all your examples. And that's what we need to do by in terms of decolonizing, because it's like not having an African lens and bringing the African lens into things. Second was the free movement. Free movement, this is again, at the African Union level, they have a free movement protocol. But in terms of countries that have signed on, there was only 4 countries that have signed on. But again, you can see as a continent, we're not united. The borders that basically were drawn by our colonizers to oppress us should not define us, but they continue to do. We're holding on to them tightly, and we need to break free from this. In terms of people moving on the continent, we as Africans should be able to walk around freely on the continent, which isn't the case. Many people still need visas for many countries on the continent. And in terms of the forcibly displaced, we should not be encouraging encampment as well. So these are things that we don't realize are tied to our colonial past, but we keep doing them and thinking we've decolonized, but we haven't. There was a template that was left, and we just continued the template. And then the last 2 I thought was reparations, which is the return of our artifacts, and financial reparations for harm on African bodies through colonialism, slavery, apartheid. And lastly, it's investing in our African excellence. A lot of the time, the Western countries basically pick the best from the continent and taken away, basically. But we need to start saying, how can we have our African brains on the continent? How do we ensure that regardless, but then that comes from the free movement and us seeing each other as one on this continent. Then we see each African as what's the best and how can we collectively move the continent to where we want to. And with that, I thought I'd just end with a quote from Thomas Sankara, who says, we must dare to invent the future. And this is where we need to go in terms of what future do we want. We know where we've come from. We know how colonialism basically disrupts us, but how do we dare to invent the future? How do we invent the future, looking into the past and basically learning from the pain that we received, but then doing better for the future? Thank you very much.
Wow, 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 Hakima. I wish I could listen to you the whole day. I mean, you just ignited something in me. You speak about the AU theme of this year, and part of that is that part of the reparations is to bring back the artifact. But listening to you, you just maybe reminded me that it's not just a stool. It's a symbol of power, stability, and unity. And I think this is what reminds Africans that they can be a stable people, they can be a united people, and they can be a powerful people once they understand their roots. So I think your presentation today just highlighted some of the things that are needed in our society in order for us, to build, on what our forefathers or our ancestors has left or started, years ago. So thank you so much for this. I will come later to just, offer some key insights that came out of your talk. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Colleagues, as we move along, I need to invite Dr. Isfina. Dr. Isfina, are you ready for us?
I'm ready.
Dr. Isfina, thank you so much. Please pick up on what, Hakima, started or launched. And maybe describe for us what is culture in an African context, or where are we in terms of cultural identity, and how does it contribute, to the role of transformation or lack of transformation thereof? Help us with that.
Thank you very much. I think I will start by even asking the question, where does culture begin and where does it end? Because culture is us. And we are our culture, and it goes back to who are we as a people. When we say African culture, who is African today? Because is it Black people? There's some that say sub-Saharan Africa. There are some people that say we are now a global community, we're now a global village. So when we say Africa or African, what are we talking about? But I also just want to highlight that most of the countries that we say are developed countries, they have developed on the basis of their own culture. And those that lose their culture, you lose your foundation, you lose your direction. So in some sense, especially building on what Hakima was saying, it means then Africa has lost its foundation and therefore has lost its direction. And we need to find a new direction, I guess. I would like to also, because I think it would be unfair for me not to quote Ngugi wa Thiong'o, especially on the issue of language. I was watching one of his videos where he says that if you know all the languages of the world and you do not know your mother tongue or the language of your culture, that is enslavement. On the other hand, if you know your mother tongue and you add all other languages of the world to it, that is empowerment. I would like to add on top of that quote that the AU currently has 6 official languages in alphabetical order: Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Kiswahili was only added in recently. Even then, it's rarely used. That is language. All that has been said by Hakim and yourself about language. What are we saying? This is our African Union, where we meet to discuss the most important things for the continent. And we use those languages. I'm not going to discriminate or highlight anyone. I'm just saying this is our identity. This is our tongue. I don't know if they're mother, but that's the tongue that we use, or those are the tongues that we use to discuss where we want to go as a continent and as a people. I would also like to highlight the issue of the broader sense of culture, which includes what we have. And what we have, for me, goes to the economy. And the economy is part and parcel of the African Union's vision of a prosperous, peaceful Africa that is driven by its citizens, playing a very important role globally, and also the prosperity part of it, which means the economy. And for me, I'm always asking the question, when we say, for example, young people are the future of this continent, yet we watch them every month, every week, actually going the opposite direction, going to Europe and other countries to seek economic survival, not even prosperity, to seek economic survival. They go by sea, some of the boats, they capsize. In the air are foreign direct investors that are coming to the continent to invest and extract and benefit from what we say culturally is our resources. Are we practicing our culture, or are we throwing away our own children? Because in Shona, there's a saying that says, Chawawana ijgane ama, mtorwa anokanganwa. Since it's Africa Day, we can speak our languages. But in translation, it means if and when you have found something special, eat with your people, because strangers, they forget. But we do the opposite. Our most important and valuable African resources, we share them with strangers while our own children are going out to seek survival. How do our ancestors feel? Because our culture is our ancestors as well. Then we get surprised when we don't find peace on the continent. How can the continent ever be peaceful if its children are hungry? Yet we are exporting the most valuable of our resources. From what Hakima also said in identifying or defining culture, there was an issue of institutions. If you look at our institutions on the continent, especially institutions of governance, for those countries that got political independence, most capitals are still the same as we found them at independence more than 60 years ago. The capitals are the same. The House of Assembly or Parliament is the same. And we use the same language that was used by the departed colonialists. So how free are we? and what identity are we carrying? So our institutions, we need to question, are we using traditional methods of governance, or have we all tended to say 5-year vote, 5-year election? And I always say, especially to young people, while you are guarding the electoral ballot, because they say, oh, because of rigging, you must make sure that your ballot box is guarded every night. In the meantime, someone is guarding your mineral resources. They are at your Ministry of Mines getting rights to go and mine. You are guarding election boxes. What does it mean? Is it our culture? Because governance, the economy, all those things are the ones that are so fundamental to Africa's development. But we spend time focusing on what is really cosmetic to me. And instead of discussing our own development issues, when we are in private, what do our leaders do? They go overseas. They'll go to the China-Africa Summit, 55 of them meeting one head of state. They'll go to the UK-Africa Summit. They'll go to the America-Africa Summit, Turkey-Africa Summit. Everybody has a summit on Africa, except Africans themselves. You hardly ever find 55 heads of state at an AU summit where you're supposed to be discussing African issues. So how is that our cultural practice? Because we're supposed to live our own culture. Yes, historically, issues of solidarity were very well demonstrated. The OAU has the Liberation Committee. After Kwame Nkrumah said, no one is free until all of Africa is free. But no, we are going to invite Americans to come and protect us from other Africans. How is that brotherhood or sisterhood? How is that protecting our culture and eating with our own? I will not even go into the issue of young people and ideology. What are we teaching them? Because even as we go back to language, you know, some parents are actually proud to take your children home, rural home or village during the holidays. They're proud, this one doesn't know isiZulu. This one can't even speak Sesotho. They speak English. We say it with pride, when we should be saying it with humiliation, because we have rented our souls to the rest of the world. And the continent, in my view, is currently floating. Everybody talks of leadership, but the leadership is so divided. We don't speak anymore with one voice. We don't protect each other anymore in line with our solidarity, Pan-Africanism, and we are everywhere. It's each, I think it's mostly men, because we only have 2 female heads of state on the continent, Namibia and Tanzania. Otherwise, broadly, it's literally each man for himself. And the results are not looking good. So we are not living our culture. We need to redefine. We can't go back, because obviously we're also a changed people because of what we've gone through, a lot of trauma, which we need to unpack. But we need to be more intentional about who we want to be, not in the past, but more for the future, especially for future generations, and no longer for ourselves, at least this current generation. I'll stop there and be able to engage with colleagues when the time comes. Thank you.
Wow. Dr. Esfina, you are not mincing your words. You are not holding back punches. And I think your presentation is timely, considering that indeed, you know, we are losing more and more our cultural fiber. You mentioned earlier on that we bought planes, we bought ships, and we go overseas to go learn about other cultures and to bring the other cultures into our African continent, and yet we don't know much about our cultural root and background. And you are saying this is leading now to, you know, a cultural decay, because we see even our leaders are going abroad, you know, to attend the overseas seminars and so forth. The overseas people are speaking about Africa, and yet we are not. And I think for us, this is this is some lesson that we need to learn, that colonialism is not yet ended. We can still feel the impact and the effect of colonialism, and we can actually see them in terms of our own behaviors and habits. So we need some changes, based on what you just presented. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the strong weight that you gave us this afternoon. Now, before I waste more time ruminating on what you just shared with us, let me invite Ms. Memory Banda to come and help us to understand how can the young people, the youth, I mean, you just spoke about the youth now, which are seen to be the engine of the African continent, but how can they help us to preserve and promote the African culture in a modern and globalized world? How do we balance the two? How do we make sure that we become global citizens and yet we become, continental citizens of our continent? Miss Memory, are you ready for us?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. You can so much shoot.
Thank you so much. I would firstly like to write on the protocols that have already been observed. And I just want to say thank you so much to IJR for actually knowing that the young people out there whose voices not only are supposed to be heard, but also for themselves to be able to speak and share their expertise. In rare occasions, we see most young people being involved in such important discussions when it comes to our continent as Africa, and most times young people are perceived as, oh, you do not know much, or you're just young, you're not yet there. But I'm so glad to be here, sitting on shoulders of those who are actually experienced and gone before me. And I have learned so much from the previous speakers and everybody who has come on board so far to share a little bit about Africa. Thank you so much. I really appreciate as a young person. I would like to say, to tackle that question, I would like to say that we cannot achieve peace and progress in Africa without honoring and actually respecting our cultural diversity. As we celebrate Africa Day, let us remember that our rich culture, heritage is actually an essential part to who we are as Africans. And also I would like to say that as a young person and as young people, we have the power to actually ensure that our culture is not forgotten, and also to make sure that it is not overlooked in the work that we actually do. As a young African leader who is actually female, I am proud to actually speak on this great agenda and important agenda when it comes to involving Africa as a continent and as our home for us as Africans. I would like to say that this is a very crucial topic, and also it's very important to us as Africans. And as a young person, I would like to say that recognizing the power that we have is actually a positive way to actually impact our communities as young Africans. And also it's one of the best way to actually preserving our rich cultural heritage as young people. And the importance of why young people should be able to safeguard, or rather know more about their cultural norms as well as just their culture. As Africans, I believe that we are the driving force as young people, and also we bring a fresh perspective to almost everything because we have a different way of looking at things and seeing things. And we bring energy to the table, not only as participants, but also as stakeholders on board. And also I would like to say, we should not forget the importance of our cultural roots. Some of the times people would ask you, what does your name mean as a young person? What does your name mean as an individual? Most of the times we don't even know what our names mean, or what actually, why we were named what we were named as. For example, I've heard my name being mentioned like 5 times on different occasions relating to different statements just here. People saying memory, memory. I grew up so embarrassed of actually being called memory because I didn't understand what it meant. I just said, why are you calling me memory? Why was I named memory? Because it didn't give me a background to why I was named memory. And when I found out, the reason was that the time I was born, 2 days after my grandmother passed, and they named me memory to be able to carry on the history of the family and to carry on her name. And so it's as simple, it's in the simple things like knowing what our names mean. And most young people in this day and time do not actually know what their names mean, or rather they're named by English names, hence them losing their cultural norms as well as just their culture and its heritage, because it starts from us. How can I then understand my culture as a young person if I can't even understand my own name and what it means? I can't even elaborate what my language would actually, what my name means in my language, or I can't actually elaborate myself in my own language. With that said, I would also like to say that partaking in an active role as a social entrepreneur and a young person, we can actually ensure that our communities remain vibrant and thriving while honoring traditions and values that we are shaped with, and also that shape us. Furthermore, youth-driven social entrepreneurs, as well as youth-driven social entrepreneurship is an essential driving economic growth and creating sustainable solutions to the challenges that we face as young people in Africa. And we are the future of Africa, not only for tomorrow, but actually for today. And we have the power to make the continent a place of opportunity and prosperity. So we need to make sure that we are embracing our roles as social entrepreneurs and young people by celebrating our culture and heritage. Together, we are actually going to bring Africa as a whole, including with the communities that we work with. And I believe that with the communities we work with, we forget the actual most important things that we need to do in the communities. We go on board to implement projects as young people, speaking English. We're forgetting that the communities that we're actually engaging with are Africans and fellow Africans. We then hence speak a language that is very uncommon to them, leading them to misinterpreting their own culture and cultural norms in the communities. How then, as young people, can we make sure that we're passing on this? We're making sure that we are also helping other young people in our communities pass on the norms and the knowledge of our traditions. We need to make sure that, one, we foster collaborations between local leaders, mostly traditional leaders. We leave them behind because we feel like, oh, they do not know much, or they're not really updated, like people say, because we're in the Gen Z world. But definitely we need to partner with them because they have experience and they know much about our traditions and our norms. We also need to make sure that we're creating grants and programs, not only waiting from the US or any other countries, but creating grants within Africa, because I believe that we can be self-sustained and we are able to help each other. Creating grants and programs that can be able to fund opportunities specifically for young African entrepreneurs to help them launch their ventures relating to cultural arts and also just other projects that are relating to the cultural norms. Because most times when we receive grants, we are taught on how we need to implement and what you actually need to implement it for. Hence, taking away the main factor of it, which is our cultural beliefs, our cultural norms, as well as our heritage. Because if you tell me I'm giving you this money and you need to implement this, you're taking away my power as a young me being able to stand strong as and independent as an African, and then adapting to your own ways of doing things. Hence, if we have these grants created for young Africans, it will be able to help us as young Africans, and it will be easier for us to implement programs and projects that will be able to celebrate our heritage and pass on our cultural beliefs and norms. The other point I would like to emphasize on is promoting education and investing in education. One of the most important tools that we have and resources young Africans is education. And if we get educated, it's the most powerful thing that actually helps us to get out there and make a difference. When we promote our education systems and fund our education systems, it helps us to adopt our own curriculums. As a trained teacher, I definitely do not feel proud to go in a classroom and teach a curriculum that is not ours, take away our own norms and heritage, and we are able to stand in front of the children and teach them things that are not actually in our systems as Africans. Hence, as promoting education and investing in education will allow us to actually be able to teach in our own different ways as Africans, like storytelling, things like classroom storytelling, where a teacher is able to share historical stories, just like the past, how they used to do it. They would tell us stories as grandmothers. How about Africans? We adopt that in our curriculums, where we're able to teach our children that in schools, and also pass on cultural norms in a classroom setup for children to be able, or students to be able to be be proud Africans or students that look forward to investing in their countries, and instead of going abroad and studying abroad and staying there and living in Africa. I think if we change our curriculum and invest in education, we'll be able to shape our education system as Africans. I would also like to say that creating more generational dialogues is really important. Platforms like this one are very rare for a young person like me. Hence, seeing other people who have gone way before me and have so much experience, it's really a learning point of view where I see things from a different perspective. In most cases, most young people are not in such spaces, hence them missing out on the other experiences of people who have gone way before us in terms of knowledge, expertise, and skills. And also creating supportive policies that can work hand in hand with our governments, and also creating policies that support youth-led initiatives to create awareness and advocacy on African history and culture. I would also like to say that celebrating success, highlighting the successful young people out there who have actually withheld or rather carried their heritage as Africans in terms of skills, talents, as well as just leadership skills. There are young people who are Africans who have done so great. We rarely celebrate them because we're always celebrating the same people, hence forgetting the young ones who have gone way before us and also are doing great in their countries and the continent. How then can we make sure that young people can ensure to preserve and promote the African culture in the modern globalized world in several ways? One, I would like to say, embracing social media. We are living in the age of AI, the Gen Z world. How then are young people, how then can young people be able to use social media as a platform to showcase African art, music, and fashion? I believe that social media can be one of the best ways in making sure that the African heritage is actually withheld with so much respect and dignity, and making sure that it doesn't slip off us just dancing to Western songs, and doesn't slip off to us adopting what we see on social media, but also being able to showcase that on our platforms. How about I wear an African attire and I'm comfortable to do that as a young person? Already it sends out a message indirectly without us realizing that as young people. How about showcasing my poems? How about showcasing my music as young African? How about promoting other young Africans who are able to showcase that? Those in arts, those in designing, those in fashion, those in education. We should be able to use social media to do that and not feel embarrassed as young people. Most times we look at platforms like LinkedIn and look at, how can I do that on LinkedIn as a young African? I think we should be very authentic with ourselves and who we are. Example, we use our own language. Maybe when saying thank you, I say Zikomo at the end of my written caption in whatever I'm trying to send out there. People will be able to see that I'm proud to be African and I'm proud to be Zambian as a young African leader. The second one would be supporting traditional arts. By learning and practicing traditional African arts such as dance, music, and storytelling, I think it would be one of the most powerful things in making sure that the modern and globalized world learns from our culture as young people. How about I learn how to tell my stories in what I do as a social entrepreneur in my language? Most of the times we have platforms like BBC, CNN, they want us to speak in our language, hence somehow limiting our ability to be able to express ourselves as young people. If I speak in English, it will be quite limiting, and one might think you do not know what you're saying, but we oversee the fact that it's maybe because I'm just expressing myself in English, which is a foreign language. How about you allow me to speak in Nyanja, Chichewa, Nsenga, Tonga, or any other language that somebody else can able to relate and understand out there as a young African? With the previous speaker, Dr. Hesfina shared that the AU has got 6 languages. If I'm not mistaken, should be Dr. Hakima or Fina. We do have those 6 languages. How far have we gone to be intentional as young people to learn such languages, or pick one language? I say, I'm going to learn Swahili and be able to relate with other Africans. We need to make sure to be intentional in making sure that we're also trying to learn from others and not only consume ourselves to ourselves as young people. Most times we're so self-driven to a point that we don't want to learn from others in terms of languages and adopting different cultures. And my last and final point would be investing in language and education. As we talk about language, I feel like we only focus on the verbal language and only focus on the physical language. How about we look at the limited language like sign language, persons with disabilities? We do not bring them on board to make sure that these young people are able to learn about culture in the language that they understand. How are we making sure that a young deaf person can understand about their culture and what culture is to them if we speak English and that is not their spoken language? Their spoken language is sign language. How about we train people in different languages? We bring our curriculums in school, and that even in our social settings where we provide information and information is disseminated in their languages that actually accommodate them. Remember, if we do not include people by language, we are then is excluding them and discriminating them against language. Because if we talk about being African, we should be able to bring everybody on board. And when we talk about language as young people, we forget the most important factor to it, that there's also non-verbal language, which are things like sign language, Braille. Are we making sure that they're on board and also being part of the conversation when it comes to language? And are we also making sure that we are learning our languages as young people? Not only that, there are also adults I've seen around who can't even speak their language. How can I learn from you if you do not know your language? How can I learn from you if I say Makadi and you don't even know how to answer that as an adult? As a young person, I stand to say that we can actually use our youthfulness to make sure that we're also taking out our cultural heritage out there through our works in making sure that we're proud to be African. When I always reach in a space, I always make sure that I tell them about my country. A very, very special thing that my country has. Zambia has one of the 7 wonders of the world. I introduce myself and say, I come from a country that has one of the 7 of the world. Why am I doing so? To make sure that people realize that I'm proud to be African. And Africa's got one of the greatest heritage sites that we have in our countries, in various different countries. Hence, as young people, we need to be proud to be Africans and be able to share our information and be open to learn from others, those who've gone before us and those who are yet to come behind us. With that said, I would like to say thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Memory Banda. You just made me wish that I was a youth again. Unfortunately, I have passed my sell-by date. Now, we hear you very well when you say a youth cannot achieve freedom without recognizing our culture, and that's going to become a propeller for us. But you also say culture must not become a cage, but a compass. You know, you speak about if we reimagine our culture with wisdom and courage, it becomes a tool for dignity, unity, and transformation. But I also hear you say, let us take this conversation into our homes, into our institutions, as well as our hearts. And I also hear you say, culture is not just about tradition, it's about how we define ourselves and how we solve problems. You speak about education, you speak about policies, you speak about storytelling, you speak about taking your place in the world out there and doing it for our youth. So I think if they can hear this message again from you, we can actually change a whole lot of things. We live in a society where our youth are now focusing on partying and drinking alcohol and so forth, and not on doing things that actually can shape the future of this continent. Thank you so much. Mwanja, I'm going to reserve my closing remarks, for the end, as well as the question and answer session. For now, let me thank my panelists for this robust discussion, and I shall speak to you again later. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mwanja.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Elijah, for moderating our panel discussion for us. It was a powerful conversation highlighting how Africa's cultural wealth can be harnessed for unity, justice, and lasting peace. Hakima was emphatic in stating that we have not yet decolonized and we should not forget our greatness. Dr. Hasfina reminded us that if we lose our culture, we lose our foundation and our direction. And this issue is both a deeply rooted psychological matter and a material concern. And one of my takeaways from Memory's presentation was the importance of young people making sure that the African culture is not neglected or overlooked in terms of the work that they do in their communities and even in the entrepreneurship space. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a musical interlude by Wandile, and the song is called Our Lives Matter. I think this is fitting for us this afternoon. Kezia, are you ready with the musical interlude by Wandile Mbambeni?
This one is titled Our Lives Matter. Mama, sithoba ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, mama, 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 ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, mama, 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 hey, 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 ay, nay, 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 nay. Hey, 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 sukoyika nami, hey, 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 kubanda nami, babi sebonke, hey, 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 ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, mama. Hey mama, hey mama, sithoba ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, nhliziyo yami, amandla ngawethu amandla, hey mama, hey mama, hey mama. Sukoyika nami, babi sebonke, babi sebonke, babi sebonke. Sithoba ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, mama, mama, mama. Sithoba ubomi ngobami, ubomi ngobami, mama, 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 mama. Amandla ngawethu amandla, mama, mama, mama.
Thank you so very much, Wandile. That was really, really inspiring. Your performance was a powerful reminder that Africa Day is not just about celebration, it's also a call to action. Our lives do matter. And that was echoed through with truth as well as hope in your soulful anthem that affirms our dignity, our strength, and the voice of every African. Thank you for giving us a sound that strikes a chord with all of our souls here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to go into a segment that explores the amplification of African stories. And we have with us Marcelo Motana as well as Leslie Lee Kasumba. I'll just take a brief moment to introduce them. Marcelo is a South African multidisciplinary artist whose work spans acting, singing, poetry, satire, cultural activism. I could just go on and on and on. She's also a poet, and she's also popularly known as the Vocal Museum. Marcelo continues to be a dynamic force in South African arts, using her diverse talents to engage with cultural, social and political narratives, and really making important waves and work that we cannot do away with when it comes to preserving our culture, our identity through the arts. Marcelo will be joined by Leslie Lee Kasumba. Lee is a Pan-African creative strategist, an award-winning voice artist and cultural creator with a passion for telling Africa's stories through media, music, and the arts. She is Ugandan by blood, but South African by nature. And Lee has championed African talent for over 2 decades across radio, television, and global platforms. Lee is a founder of She Speaks Africa, and she drives dialogue, innovation, and investment in Africa's creative economy through projects like the Africa Whisperer podcast, which earned international recognition. She's consulted for Rock Nation, Forbes Africa, Red Bull Music Academy, and many others. She's a sought-after speaker and moderator. Lee continues to elevate African voices and narratives through storytelling, strategy, and collaboration. I really feel I'm in awe to be in a room with Africa's great individuals like Marcelo. And Marcelo, we'll start with you if you can please unmute yourself. Tell us about the performing arts and storytelling, exploring African identity and resilience in your space. Over to you, Marcelo.
Asante, Program Director. Jambo, everybody. Ziko Mogambiri for inviting me. As I've been introduced, my name is Marcelo Motana. I'm a storyteller, and I'm a vocal historian and the founder of the Vocal Museum. But what I wanted to present today was an example of when artists engage, specifically when artists engage authority. There are many ways that we perform, as you said, TV, film, but there are other times where that is not enough of a reach. When we desperately need to spread the message, then we take it to the streets. You know, when people want to protest, when ordinary members of society want to protest, they take it to the streets. So as artists, sometimes when we need to reach out to particular members of society, then we perform outside of your traditional theater, museum spaces. So Veronique, can we go into that first slideshow, please? So I'd like to show you an example of some work I did around Fees Must Fall. And what had happened, or that first picture is of me when I was 9 years old in my father's theater troupe. So that's where I started, and that's what continues to inspire my work, and also inspired by people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o for when he wrote plays and that were performed the community group, what we call the Theatre of the Dispossessed, and also inspired by people like Amiri Barak. Move on and just let the rest of it roll. So in 2016, there were these protests by South African students, and there was police presence on campus, heavy police campus. And for me, as a South African who's grown up under apartheid, I just found it unacceptable that police can actually go onto school campuses as opposed to the leadership trying to engage with the students. Yeah, we can let the rest of the Thank you. So what I did then, I formed a theatre group. I advertised on Facebook using a new media that I was looking for performers who would be able to come out and put together a piece. So I couldn't really plan the whole script without knowing how many people are going to be there, because it's not like your normal theater play where you have a script and you understand the numbers and you can put out an audition. I had to audition on Monday, put this thing out by Thursday. So once I realized how many people I had, which was myself plus 3 people, then I started framing around that. With other experiences, I would be performing outside and trying to shout their message. I remember an anti-xenophobia protest where we were shouting the message, and there's cars and trucks, you know, it gets lost. So I learned from those experiences that maybe dialogue is not the best, like scripted words. Music carries more, which is why in this piece you can see a trumpeter. So there I had a soundtrack using music to communicate what I would have normally done with dialogue. So then I had to employ all these other things, costume, masks, as you can see in that clip. And this costume that I'm wearing here with a big bird thing. When a friend of my mother's friend saw it, she said, this reminds me of back in the day when people used to negotiate for weddings. They would literally wear masks and stuff, because when you're going to negotiate with a family that already knows you, so now you need to hide yourself somehow. And I only learned that after the fact. So sometimes you learn as you go along, and I wasn't aware that I'm reenacting such an old form of perspective. Can we move on to the second one? So this was 2016, and we actually went to the police station. The children here had watched, because we'd been doing it every 15 minutes. So after they wanted to join. So 2016, we took it to the police station to engage the police and the crowds at the police station. And then 2 years later, there were this regular protests of registering for space in schools. And a young man got shot right outside where this performance is taking place. And I wanted to reenact that shooting. And I had a policeman character who was on stilts, because I felt that I had to amplify the message, because the last time we'd done it, everyone was level. So I felt that to amplify the message, and I had 2 percussionists to you once again using music as a soundtrack. So now we had to take the scale up physically, employ other uses of taking the message to people. And you can see people have their phones. So it's theater, but once there's a screen that goes up, then another element of capturing is involved. So theater travels by itself these days on the continent. So these 2 pieces are just an example of when artists engage with authority and with audiences outside of traditional media, television, and theater. And what I have done since then is form, but the Vocal Museum is an archival intervention. So it's a collection of memories from my perspective to try and form a memorabilia, a scrapbook, you know, because whenever I look at the official adverts about what should make me proud to be a South African, very often I don't see myself. I don't see an African identity, and I don't see myself in those presentations. So then I put together a scrapbook of memorabilia, which is put up in a format of a performance, and that's why it's called the Vocal Museum. So then the other 2 speakers mentioned the repatriation of treasures. I just wanted to say that for us, they are treasures. For Europeans, they are artifacts. For us, it's our things. They are treasures. So I'm also involved at that in that discussion internationally. I've been invited by anthropological museums in Europe saying, we have these problematic collections. You have a museum that has no object. Can help us to negotiate going forward what's the future of these museums.
Thank you so very much, Marcelo, for your presentation. really, really striking a chord with all of us. And, you know, I like what you say towards the end, what might be seen as an artifact. As we've, you know, from the time that Hakima also spoke, it's not just artifacts. For us, it's treasures. It's part of our identity, symbolism of who we are culturally, and part of our heritage that we treasure as Africans. Thank you so much. Leslie, I'll go to you right now. Given the role that you've been playing in Africa for quite a long time right now, what can you tell us about amplifying African voices, as well as maybe touching upon the role of media as well? Over to you, Lee.
Thank you so much, Mwanja, for inviting me. Honestly, I just want to say, first of all protocol is observed. To the IJR, thank you for this powerful platform. Literally, in all my years, this platform and the speakers and my colleagues have made me feel that Africa is in a safe place, because they're people with a wealth of knowledge, with passion. You know, I think we're headed in the right direction. And thank you again, Mwanja, for always putting together these powerful conversations. You know, when we talk about the role of media and amplifying African voices, right? To answer your question directly, Mwanja, I have to go back to a time when for me growing up, and I actually remember Marcelo, Marcelo, hi, when I saw her. Very good to see her again. You know, for me growing up, being Ugandan, living in South Africa, I'm now based in Accra, in Ghana. I remember as a millennial, you know, when we thought about anything that was African, you know, African culture, African music, African fashion was not in vogue at all. You know, it was not part of, even as an African, you couldn't really celebrate yourself. And, you know, if you wore any fabrics or that kind of thing, it was not really part of what your cultural experience was. And people were not really celebrating it, you know. It's only really in the last, say, 10 to 12 years where I feel that there has been a shift there has been a shift where people see anything, you know, anything that comes from Africa as being, or a lot of what's coming from Africa as being on trend and all of that kind of thing, which in itself is quite dangerous, you know. But I feel as though media has played a role, because when I look back, growing up with my, you know, in South Africa, as I mentioned, between South Africa and Uganda, and my cousins who were in the western part of the world, I couldn't understand why we had the same musical kind of, like, you know, the people that I loved, you know, were the same ones who were abroad, you know, and we had the same taste. And it wasn't because of our family links. It was because basically media was broadcasting and sharing the same kind of stories. So a lot of Africans, you know, from my time, people grew up watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Bill Cosby. You know, we all have that experience. I'm sitting there, like, what does that have to do with anything? Your favorite artists, you know, name them Destiny's Child, you know, that kind of thing. And I feel that now, that was my experience as a millennial, but I feel as though with Gen Z, one of the things that I have to say is that the music industry has done a great job, because for Gen Z, a lot of them are growing up with African artists as part of their childhood history and memory, and that is fantastic. And I think for that, you know, we can see that music, when it's properly utilized, can help reshape and rebrand the way that people see themselves, even as Africans, you know. And so when we ask what the change has been from the time when I was growing up, and I think Marcelo might relate, you know, when I was growing up and so forth, to now people being more appreciative and wanting to know about other African countries, year of return, all of that. People wanting to travel to Ghana, people wanting to, you know, eat Ethiopian food, whatever the case may be. People knowing about jollof rice if you're sitting in Southern Africa, you know, people knowing about South African music, culture, all of that. What has changed for me, I feel, is that social media has been the great equalizer. It really has. And when you look at COVID, for me, COVID was a point of chaos for the world, but it set the stage because the playing ground was leveled, right? Because all of a sudden there were no distributors, there were no TV networks telling you what you could put on, what you couldn't put on. Nobody was telling you what to do. The whole world, well, most of the world was on their devices. They needed to be entertained. They wanted to find a way of feeling a lot better and to be able to move forward, you know? And from that, COVID was where I feel that African music was catalyzed into the global status that it is now. And with the growth of African music and with the explosion of African music, we have seen different things like African language. You know, people are speaking in pidgin, speaking in, you know, different languages because they're hearing it in the songs, right? African fashion designers are now being recognized globally a lot more because our artists are now even proud of their African heritage. So they'll say, nobody's going around saying, my name is Melissa, no disrespect to Melissa, but people are going out saying, oh, my name is, they're using their names. My name is Ayo, as in Wizkid, for example. So people are really proud of who they are as Africans, and that kind of pride, has been instilled because the music industry, I've always felt, has the potential to bring people together, regardless of language, regardless of where it is that they come from, because a good song is a good song. And COVID for me, I feel was one of those turning points. We already were on the trajectory of African music gaining global status, but because now you didn't have to travel for people to know your music, you didn't have to have a label, you didn't have to be able to have a distributor. It really changed the way that consumers could select the music they wanted. It changed the way that artists could put their music out, and also some of the highest performing songs on social media now are from African artists. And I feel that that has been one of the mediums that has been such a good thing for African media and African culture across the board. Now, when I think about the importance of when you think of this about the importance of the creative and culture sector, I feel like the creative and culture sector has a way of really bringing people together and helping us be able to rebrand Africa. So if I'm trying to find a way to say this, I'm not offensive to anyone, but say for example, I know being in South Africa for a while, a lot of times when people would hear what Lagos was about or hear Nigeria, all we got were the negative stereotypes about Nigeria and Nigerians. And a lot of this was because of previously, colonial masters wanted to keep us separated as Africans, right? Once the music started to explode, both in Nigeria and South Africa and across the continent, across the board, I suddenly, people who never even wanted to know anything about Lagos, and I'll be traveling back and forth, they'll be like, oh, can we go to Lagos this weekend? I'm like, sure. I mean, I don't even know if that's how it really works, but it was just exciting to hear that. Hearing people wanting to travel more to Kenya, wanting to travel more around the continent. And I think this is just an example because music, it kind of stitches together culture. So from the way that people dress to the languages that people use to the names that they call themselves, all of that, music is so powerful because it helps people be able to identify and learn a new culture in a way that is going to just hit home. They'll be like, oh, this is a great song. This is a great dancer. Bonche. Oh, what does that mean? Where's she from? That kind of thing. So I feel for me that music and the creative and cultural sector as a whole is a glue that really holds us all together. Now, when we talk about why stories matter, I wanted to break it down into 4 sections. So first, stories matter and culture matters and the creative sector matters. All of that matters because stories shape perception and perception drives policy, power and investment. And that is something that is so well needed. A few of my colleagues have already said that, we need to see more of an investment in the creative and culture sector so we don't have artists having to it's great if they're traveling abroad, but they don't need to be based abroad. We need to create systems within the continent so that as the world is enjoying African music and culture and all of that, within the continent, we are the beneficiaries and ecosystems are being created and economies are being built. Feasible economies are being built within Africa. Also, when you think about the power of story and why it matters, if you look into the tech sector, the reason, the world didn't invest in Silicon Valley until the story of innovation was told. So we have to ask ourselves, what stories of innovation are we telling about African innovation currently? That's important, and telling a story, even as an individual, if each one share one. If you know something about a great African tech innovation story, share that story so people know that it's there and it's working. We have obviously had a lot of great success stories, but I feel like we need to be doing a lot more in this. Again, I mentioned a bit earlier about Nollywood and Afrobeats and all of that. They did more than just entertain. It's very easy to look at it and just be like, oh, they were just partying, it was just this, the Nollywood movies are this. People can say all of those things, but the reality is it has rebranded Nigeria. It is the soft power of what the creative and culture sector has done. And when you look at Nollywood and Afrobeat, it has rebranded Nigeria and given other sectors in Nigeria the opportunity to really show the rest of the world what is possible. So I feel that when people see themselves reflected with pride, they act differently, they build differently. And this comes back to a quote that I know we're all very familiar with: until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. I feel that with the breaking through of social media, and we need to ensure that we're utilizing it in the same way, we are now individually, as groups, media houses have to be on social media. We are all telling our stories on our terms. Nobody can really come and tell us, say it in this way. Number two, the gap and the shift. So the gap is Africa's rich cultural legacy, which has been expressed throughout this entire webinar. I don't think there's anything more that I can add to it. My colleagues have spoken so well, but the gap is Africa's rich cultural legacy, which has been misrepresented or ignored in global media previously. Now, when you think about it, 70%, just for some numbers, 70% of African stories in international outlets are still written outside of the continent. It's like we should be greenlighting our own scripts. We should be writing our own scripts. You know what I mean? Most of the funding for media in Africa goes to non-African platforms. Again, this is a question of, as investors in Africa, do we not see our African platforms and our stories as being powerful enough? I mean, for me, growing up in South Africa, there was a lot going on. Just to give it an idea, there was a lot going on, obviously, with Nelson Mandela, former President Nelson Mandela, and may he rest in peace. And we would all get upset. I know for me, also being on radio, every time somebody else was playing Nelson Mandela, we're like, why is this person playing Nelson Mandela? People were making noise and complaining. But you know what? Whoever's putting money into a story has control of that story, And as much as we can talk about, pardon me, my earpiece, sorry, whoever's putting money into a story and a script has control over that story. And as much as we may want to complain about it, we can look at the symptom or we can look at the actual cause of it. And the cause is that we don't have enough investment in Africa, in African stories. Let's look at fashion, for example. Fashion has been mentioned quite a bit. This stat, when I heard it, blew my mind. For fashion that's in Africa, over 40% of everything that we wear in Africa is produced, designed by somebody outside of Africa. This is crazy. These are jobs, fashion is culture, like we said. There are huge gaps in the fashion industry, not just for Africans to be able to be wearing, clothes that is produced in Africa, but also for the rest of the world to be able to get products from Africa. This means that for all the young people, the young people that are able to work, all the creatives, we should be having manufacturing factories. We should be creating large ready to wear. We should be having people created directly and making clothes from African factories, because as of a continent of over 1 billion people, this is unacceptable. I could absolutely not believe it. I almost wanted to go and, go through all of my clothing labels, but then I guess I would end up with almost nothing, which I think many people would feel that same way. Now, also another sector to look at is when you look at sports, I feel that creative culture, tech, entrepreneurship, and sports all fall within the same sector. They kind of are linked together in how people see Africa. AFCON in 2024 had 1.4 billion viewers around the world, and that's according to the Nelson Global Report, right? This rivals the Super Bowl. Now, for the Super Bowl, an advert on the Super Bowl can set a brand back like $8 million. Have we valued how much it would cost to advertise on AFCON? Are we putting the same value? For example, I mean, even when you think about soccer, I think, Mwanja, you're the one who mentioned something about how we need to be self-investing. And also, Memory also mentioned something about that, about self-investing. In 2018, we all remember watching the World Cup. France won the World Cup. Hala, amazing. The whole team, they were basically like 80% of the team was made up of African immigrants or second generation immigrants, And I remember having a chat with Aisha Johansson, who is on one of the CAF committees. And I said to her, I was like, oh, Aisha, can you believe this? Africa actually won the World Cup. France has done this. She literally messaged me back and she said to me, no, talent is one thing, investment is another thing. If France had not spent money on the investment and development of these players, would we know about them? And then you hear stories about Mbappe, who his dad wanted him to play for Cameroon. What happened when we got there? Pay to play. This is crazy. We cannot be on the receiving end. We need to find a way of investing in sectors, like in all of these sectors, so that we build an economy, and across the board, because sports, music, creative, all of that, it's not just about the people in the front line. It's all of the surrounding economies, all of the surrounding jobs that can be created, you know? And now when you look at the shift, I feel that we're in the middle of a media renaissance. You have shows which are doing extremely well. Like Shagai Lembe, honestly speaking, Nomzamo did an amazing work with this. Because even me, Marcelo would know my Zulu is not is not at its best. But I sat there and I was like, whatever happens, I need to learn KZN Zulu. Do you understand? Like, I didn't even want to watch it with subtitles. I was like, I wanted to watch it. King of Boys from Nigeria, which was put together by an amazing female director, Femi Iwaju, the amazing Disney project that was put together by, African creators. Talk about love in every word, which is an amazing love story about, just talking about rural versus city people and how that all works. This surpassed 10 million views on YouTube to date. It's only been out for 2.5 months. African music, African stories are breaking ground. We're breaking ground. It's up to us to take advantage because right now the playing field has been equalized. You look at platforms like YouTube. YouTube, I think, is going to be huge. It is already huge. There's so many YouTube channels, and people have really taken advantage of it. And we need to be able to push and to watch that. Showmax's mandate is really in Africa is really around hyper local, so they're focusing a lot on it. Ebony Live Studios, Mo Abudu has done phenomenally. What she's done with Ebony Live Studios and Nigerian Stories is like a PhD session. She's incredible. Platforms like AfriPod, who have been pushing African podcasting culture, amazing. Africa No Filter, amplifying authentic voices. When you look at podcasting, for example, the global podcast industry is currently valued at $32.4 billion. Africa is not even scratching the surface. We need investment. We need to be able to push these stories. We need to be able to ensure that people are going to hear us. Now, we're not waiting, we're no longer waiting for permission to tell our stories anymore. We are now exporting them. And this is such a critical time as Africans, as investors, as stakeholders in the creative and culture sector across the board, whether it's tech, sports, whatever dispensation of the creative and culture sector in general, we need to really ensure that we're getting the right support locally. Culture as a catalyst is where the real impact is, because when African stories are amplified, tourism grows. Look at the story of Rwanda, how that was told. Look at Beyond the Return, where they in Ghana, being based in Ghana, I've actually seen it. They were returned in 2019. Their tourism sector got 3.3 billion in revenue because they decided to tell stories about Ghana. They invited the diaspora. And everybody, it wasn't just people in the diaspora, even within the continent, the amount of people that I know everywhere that are like, can I come visit you in Ghana? I'm like, it's not a party every day, but I'm glad that you're thinking about the vibes, the creative economies, so creative economies will also scale. So fashion again, music, film, cuisine, these are all important. I just think it's so funny when I see people in China trying to eat egusi. I'm like, okay, so we have moved forward with their hands, Before we used to be laughed at if people were eating with their hands, but now because of the breaking down of people understanding cultures and wanting to know a lot more, we're also seeing that change quite a bit. Young Africans are new pathways beyond survival. They see storytelling as a strategy, not just art, and they don't leave their country. A lot of people are trying to do more within the continent. We still do have a bit of issues, obviously, as we've mentioned before, because of economic hardships where people want to leave the continent. But people are more proud of representing who they are and where it is that they come from. So in conclusion, the call to action is Africa should be authored by us. Culture is not costume, it's capital, and the media is how we cash in on it. If we want an Africa that's powerful, confident, and thriving, we must invest in our storytellers, our platforms, and our languages. And the final thought, the Africa we dream of isn't in the future, it's in our stories right now. All we have to do is turn up the volume. And before I end, because everybody was talking about languages and names and all of that stuff, I guess allow me to reintroduce myself as Navunya Kasumba. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Wow, two powerful voices, one resounding message. African stories belong to us and they must be heard. From the stage to the screen, their work is proof that African stories told with authenticity and courage can heal, inspire, and transform generations. It's also heartening to hear that African media is now undergoing a renaissance. But you've reminded us also, Lee, that talent is one thing and investment in talent is another. Wow. Yeah. And through the performing arts and media, African stories, African creatives are breathing life into African identity and culture, ensuring our stories are not just told, but felt, honored, and remembered. And now to give us a hint of what it is that she does, I'm going to ask Marcelo to take us into a musical interlude. Are you ready, Marcelo? Thank you.
Hello.
Over to you, my
Yes.
sister.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asante. I'm going to perform something from an upcoming musical project. It's a band called Garanga Baranga. And this song is inspired by the work that I did around the repatriation of treasures. And basically, the lyrics are saying, if you have stolen it, please bring it back. If you have borrowed it, if you're looking after it, thanks very much. Just bring it back. Oh, utswitse rabushe rabushe oh adimile rabushe rabushe oh, tlhokometse rabushe rabushe oh, di fitlhile ga di bushe ga di bushe lidoda duba lidoda duba lidoda duba lidoda duba kama unaiba unilete unilete kama ulilazimisha unilete unilete kama ulilicha unilete unilete kama unaichunga vizuri unilete unilete utakuja siku utakuja siku utakuja siku utakuja siku lidoda duba lidoda duba lidoda duba unilete. Asante, asante sana.
Asante sana, siyabonga. Siyaleboga. Thank you, Marcelo. Your performance is more than just a song. Bring it back, whether you've borrowed it or whether you've stolen it. It's a call out. It calls out injustice with fearless grace, echoing the demand for restoration of our land, of our culture, of our language, of our dignity. And on this Africa Day, your voice has reminded us that healing begins with truth. And above all, as has been echoed throughout this afternoon, above all, Returning what belongs to Africa is not a favor, but it's a right to Africans, not only on the continent, but to Africans everywhere. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Professor Tim, are you ready to give us your few reflections on Africa Day? Professor Tim is the head of peace building and interventions at the IJR. Tim, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, over to you, Tim.
Very good. So I think what's emerging really is that at a basic level, we need to inculcate really a spirit of Pan-Africanism and Pan-African identity, which has been lacking. And it's really at the heart of the fragmentation that we are seeing. There's a very interesting project unfolding in the Sahel with the Alliance of Sahelian States and the confederation that they're building right now. And as a first step, I think our challenge is to forge a Pan-African consciousness, which we have to work on. It's not something that emerges automatically. So we need the social cultural exchange programs, like what we've been listening to today, academic programs, artistic exchanges, youth engagement. The youth have to lead us. The Gen Zs have been at the forefront of change in our continent. So we need to ask them to step up and take leadership now, as the older generation seems to be struggling a little bit. In terms of Pan-African consciousness, then we need to concretize identity with that basis, decolonizing the mindset. Pan-African identity would include our sense of association, belonging to Africa, nurturing our younger brothers and sisters who are unfortunately risking their lives to travel to Europe to seek so-called greener pastures. But this act of immigration is an indictment on our continent, really, and it challenges us to really create a continent where our fellow Africans feel that they belong and that they can survive and thrive. So this Pan-African identity, again, will not just happen by itself. We have to affirm it on a daily basis. Pan-African identity can be cemented by the African Union passport. I hope our brother Dr. Raj will take this message back, that we need that Pan-African Union passport so as, in fact, to manifest our Pan-African citizenship, which, will take us into a whole different realm, make Pan-African citizenship as a concrete goal and objective, and its foundation has to be built on our own self-motivated, self-driven mindset shift. We have to shift the mindset, shift our consciousness away from the state-centric identity that we have towards a Pan-African identity, which is the glue that will affirm our Pan-African citizenship and make manifest once and for all our Pan-Africanness, a real sense of our Pan-African interconnectedness. And this is not someone else's job. This is everybody on this platform. Speak to your family members, your friends, your classmates, your colleagues. This is our internal homework. We have to be doing this everywhere we are. Each of us has to take on this very important self-work. No one is coming to awaken your Pan-African consciousness. Rather, they are even more keen to fragment us and divide us. So this is your urgent mission. Every morning, every night before you go to sleep, please activate your Pan-African consciousness. We have an African Union protocol on the free movement of people. We hope that will become a reality that will allow us to travel the length and breadth of our magnificent continent. Again, I'm requesting Dr. Raj to put this on his agenda items to recommit to reviving this protocol, accelerate the issuing of the African Union passport to all Africans as soon as possible, so that we can actually begin to interact with each other as Pan-Africans. In the end, our nation states will become mere administrative units, just like the provinces that we have in many of our countries, and we'll be able to move across them freely, back and forth without any issues. And then touching on very briefly on the issue of reparations that Dr. Raj also raised, reparations is also about rebuilding that relationship between Africa and the former slave owning and colonial countries, And reparations also is a way of mending that broken relationship between Europe, North America, Africa. And there is a growing movement of the African diaspora to reconnect and return to the continent. We've seen in Ghana, the Pan-African village, in Ethiopia, the Shoshomane. And so reparations is also an opportunity to inaugurate a new global political order that transforms the international system and makes it more equitable, particularly to Africa, as you've heard, the exclusion of Africa in the past. So the restructuring and reconfiguring of international institutions is very much a function of the reparative agenda. And in this regard, Europe, North America have to recalibrate their relationship with Africa. Europe needs to get serious about the process and the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, which looms large on our continent in terms of the way we think, which is why this theme of the year, justice for Africans and people of African descent, is very important to Africa, but you find that our friends and sisters, brothers and sisters in the global north seem to be bemused, a bit surprised, and have not really engaged fully in it. So reparations is not really just about Africans. It's also about the Europeans, the descendants of the beneficiaries of the system of the past, who also have to reimagine how they can exist on the basis of equality with Africans. And so EU diplomats, EU citizens should take on this issue seriously, engage with it, engage African think tanks like the IJR. What does reparations mean? How do we pursue them symbolically or otherwise? How do we return the artifacts? What are the creative ways to promote economic redress through debt cancellation, climate reparations, climate financing, this sort of thing? So at the end of the day, really, what we are ultimately trying to say in a very simple way is that we have to affirm and acknowledge our common humanity. We need to empower world citizens to build infrastructures for peace, justice, and activate local solidarity networks to support continental and global social movements to find creative ways to activate and improve our livelihoods. So ultimately, the important thing is that we need to commit to a future where the whole of humanity can live together in peace and harmony, rather than what we're currently witnessing. And through this activation of our Pan-African consciousness, identity, and ultimately citizenship, this is something that we can definitely strive towards achieving. Thank you, Mwanja.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tim. Thank you for those reflections. And as we were reflecting, I mean, really at the heart of Africa Day, you're reminding us that it's a time to reclaim our identity, affirm our belonging, and deepen our commitment as well to Pan-Africanism. And we're reminded that culture is not just a celebration of heritage, but a force that connects, powers, as well as transforms. And Pan-Africanism calls us to unity through shared stories, values, and struggles, as we've heard, and as we continue to remind one another. And looking at the theme for this year as well, the call for reparations remains urgent. It's not only correct, it's not just a matter of correcting historical injustices, but also to restore dignity and power to African people everywhere. As we honor our past and shape our future, let's move forward with a renewed commitment to justice, solidarity, as well as self-definition. Kezia, I don't know if you're ready for our session or our Q&A and our discussion. I'm not too sure if our attendees will be able to use their microphones. I don't see any questions in the Q&A section, but you can look at the chats as well as see. Let's engage with our participants. Over to you, Kezia.
Thank you, Mwanja. I think we could just give a few minutes for if anyone has any comments to just kind of add it to the Q&A or chat box at the moment. I see Nandi has kind of brought forward a question for Dr. Haspina, saying that's very interesting. I'd love for you to expand on that. The worst security risk is people that have nothing to lose. So I think maybe we could start with that question.
Thank you, Nandi, for the question. I remember when we were at university, they would go for protests for whatever reason. I think my first one was when Samora Machel died. We all went onto the streets, burning cars and breaking everything that was in our way. And when we got back to class, the lecturers would say, just wait until you buy a car. You understand how painful it is to lose something. But in this case, it's what I'm saying is when you are a young person, as we have seen them risking everything they have, and that everything they have is just their body, probably the soul is half eaten by hopelessness. When you have nothing to lose, you can do anything. You can walk into the Atlantic Ocean, you can walk into the Red Sea, because we have no future. You really are not afraid of anything. So in terms of security, by not ensuring that somebody or everybody has something to want to protect, we are losing our security that way. That's actually, it's my image and vision of it. And I think I've seen it. People don't mind going to jail because it's actually better in jail than outside. And you take them out, they do something, I can't live with you. I don't live in the same world as you. Let me go. So security-wise, I think we're creating insecurity by creating and perpetuating poverty.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. Dr. Raj, we seem to have a new message. So Dr. Svina just also added that when you have lost hope for the future, lost family, have never worked, what is your interest in preventing the city from burning? I don't know if there's any of the panelists that would also kind of like to just give their inputs on that question. Perhaps Prof. Tim, if I can call you to the front.
Who's been in the space for a very long time.
Yes, Keisha?
So Dr. Svina just added a comment/question saying, when you have lost hope for the future, lost family, have never worked, what is your interest in preventing the city from burning? It was kind of linked back to what she just discussed. So I want to know if you had any input in that regard or any additional comments you'd like to add.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question and dilemma, in fact. What is to prevent the city from burning? In this case, I think we're referring to our continent of Africa. What is to prevent Africa from burning to the ground? We're quite a fragmented peoples. As you know, we have 14 conflicts across our continent, a whole number of other smaller ones that we're not even aware of. Lots of cross-border illicit trade, arms trafficking. So in a very real sense, our city, our continent, Africa, is very much burning. But, you know, losing hope means that, in fact, we've downed our tools and we are now waiting for the end. And also, I don't believe in this digital age, there is such a thing as never having worked, because everybody with a cell phone or even somebody who can borrow somebody's cell phone, smartphone, or find a way to access platforms, you know, is able to convert their talent into some form of communication. So we should not discount what is out there. It's never going to be the case that you'll be able to apply for a job and get it and, you know, end up living life in the traditional sense that we used to in the past. The world has changed dramatically, but we're in a huge opportunity, even this platform. We wouldn't be able to function without the technology that we're utilizing and artificial intelligence. I think even there's an AI that's recording what we are saying right now. So we have to be innovative. You have to hold on to hope. Hope is not lost because the circumstances around you seem to be dire. Hope is lost when you, as a human being, decide that you've given up on hope. That is when hope is lost. Hope is not lost because of your external circumstances, in the sense as every individual has that inner power, that inner agency to keep going at all costs. And if you think your situation is dire, try to imagine Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison. He had every reason to lose hope, but for 27 years, he waited patiently until he enabled a transition, which is imperfect and has many challenges. But he showed that you do not lose hope under any circumstances. You keep going, you remain resilient, and you acknowledge you have that inner power to keep going at all costs. So that would be my response to this question, and to also say that it is upon all of us to prevent the city from burning, which means everybody has to do what they can in their own small space to actually prevent this from happening. Even tweeting 140 characters can contribute to something, right? So let's not discount our ability to influence. And when we come together in groups, more than 1, 2, 3, we can achieve even more. So this is extremely important going forward for us to remember. Let me stop there, Keisha.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. Tim. And Ms. Nandi actually commented quite a powerful message in the comments, and she said that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And Ms. Leslie, I know that you said that Prof answered what you were going to say, but I also just wanted to open the space for you if you also had any additional comments or insights you wanted to give on the topic.
Thank you so much, Keisha. I feel as though when we talk about people who have never owned cars or worked, they don't care if the city burns down. We have to remember, and I'm not part of Gen Z, but I'm gonna speak on behalf of them. For millennials and people before millennials, there were a lot of protests and activation. Whether it was theater protests, or protests through music, or protests of people going to the streets in order to change the status quo. So protest, nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, oh, I'm just going to go and just burn this thing. At least I hope not. But it's when people get tired and they want to see change, that's what it is that happens. And I feel like when you look at Gen Z, for example, it makes me, I obviously would not push going around burning and destroying things, but it also makes me think that, wow, they're actually doing something and they're being more proactive in wanting to push the continent further. When we look at protests from the perspective and things burning down in a digital format, from the perspective of what Gen Z in Kenya did, listen, that sparked global, people were talking about that. Even African youth across the continent were just so impressed by the fact that no matter what, young Kenyans were going to go to the streets because they knew that they deserved better. So it always does depend. Of course, there's always vigilante, there's always that kind of thing, and there's a lot of political stories that can be told about it. But when people don't want to maintain the status quo, and when people want things to change for the better, and when a large group of people come out, there is something to be said. And people only get to the point of protest when they've not been listened to. It is always the last point when they have not been listened to, So I think even from that perspective, it goes back to the quote about the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Maybe people have felt that they've not been embraced, and that's why they want to be heard. I don't think anybody wants to live in a situation where everything around them is burned, whether they own a car, own a home, or not. That's not their ideal go-to. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree with your comment there. Dr. Raj, aligned with what you said earlier about the initial ideas for all Africans to have a passport, Siku Karanja commented saying that we already have the East African passport. Could we approach the Unified African Document Thought Regional Administrative Blocks? I just want to know if you have any feedback or insights with regards to that.
Thank you for that question, but I think you're asking the wrong person there. The question of the passport, the African. Even Professor Tim knows that this is not within my purview. But we have the East African passport. Definitely, we have what also the ECOWAS passport. The idea is for regional integration. So I know when the EU passport was launched, so the initial idea was to, like to start and also gradually to have all African citizens to have the African passport. But then again, and there were serious breaches that were found on the system. Even as we speak today, we have even the members of General Assembly of ECOSOC. Only the leadership, they have the passport, but not all the General Assembly members. So, I mean, this is a question, indeed, as you rightly mentioned. In fact, we have been championing the Free Movement Protocol, the African Free Movement Protocol. But then again, the question of even having a passport or even having a visa to enter in, another African member state is something that is beyond, I mean, I don't know if it's a utopia, but then again, it's if that once that the FMP, is fully enforced, you don't even need to have an African passport to travel across Africa. But then again, as I'm saying, it's not within my purview, one mandate to comment on the African passport. But again, as part of our role to echo what the citizen wants to the policy organs of the African Union, we will keep reiterating the need to have the African passport, or why not to remove, the requirement to have visa to enter X, Y, Z member states. But again, my apologies for that one. I'm not in a position to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raj. Dr. Spin, I see you have your hand raised. The floor is yours.
Yes, for me, when we started this debate with Dr. Raj, it was more the message of the intention for everybody to have an African passport. And obviously, we all know we have so many intentions. And in as much as we're saying we want integration, and I take in Prof. Tim's comments as well, and these are things for me, as we grow older, we've been talking about it for the past 20 years. When we say they are secure, I can understand if there are technical security risks, but my understanding of the delay is that Africans don't want Africans to be walking all over. And that's where this whole discussion about how can we be a danger to ourselves, because we find we have the strictest restrictions on visa amongst ourselves compared to other people. So is this mindset shift again that maybe we don't even imagine the Africa we would want to see when every African can just wake up in the morning, take your bag and go. But we can send goods by DHL, it's secure. Your suitcase can get lost. It can go to Abidjan and come back, it's okay. But no individual, you can't get lost. They make sure the restriction of people is tighter than that of goods. So even the continental free trade area, you are prepared to receive my goods, but you're not prepared to receive me. So for me, those are the fundamental questions that we need to ask. It's not even a technical glitch or, yeah. Are we afraid of ourselves? That's all.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And Ms. Leslie, also aligned with this discussion, has said that the fact that someone on an international as a non-African passport to travel more freely than an African with a green African passport shows how far we have to go with mentality. I think we'll leave open for a few more, 2 minutes maybe, for any further comments. Mwanja, are you happy with that?
Yes, we're running out of time, except I don't know if Hakima, you'd like to comment on any one of the topics we've covered? I don't know if Hakima is with us. Dr. Hesfina, I see your hand is up before we move to the next segment.
Yes, it's a challenge to the young people I see and that have spoken, that having been on this panel, how are you going to leave the talk, and especially the artists, and collaborate and maybe one day invite us to something that came out of this event and say, yes, we were challenged and this is how we're breaking the borders as young people working together in the art space or culture space.
Okay, we'll take a brief comment from Hakima. Then I see Dr. Raj's hand is also up. Over to you, Hakima, then we'll go to Dr. Raj. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for me, it's just more or less to reinforce. I think part of one of the recommendations I said we had was to work on the free movement protocol. And I'm glad a lot of the conversation has come out around that as well, because ultimately we need to accept ourselves before others need to accept us. So if we other ourselves as Africans, how do we expect to be treated differently elsewhere? So I think Africans are the only people on the continent, you're othered. And then when you travel again, you're othered. But as a European, anywhere you go to, you're accepted. You're also accepted on this continent, yet you were the colonizer. So I think we do have a long way to go as Africans in terms of breaking down the borders that were put in place for us, because they weren't for us ultimately. So we need to remember that and also do something about it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Raj, I see you still have your hand raised.
Thanks. Yeah. So what I wanted just to mention that we have made deliberate efforts in most of our flagship events to invite artists as a way of integration, but also for us to share cultural experiences. So we have done it for many events, like we have been inviting even artists from across the continent. So we'll be very happy also that IGR send the contact details of the artists to us. So whenever feasible on the roster that we have, we will always find means and ways, at least one or two, depending on the activities where we are hosting the activities also to bring artists on board. So one of the key components, if you look at the denomination of ECOSOC, unlike the UN ECOSOC, the N is only one C. But for ECOSOC here, you see at the end, we have 2C. The other extra C is for the Cultural Council also. As I mentioned, I mean, like I've not been wearing the hat I have been wearing before, where I was lecturing cultural tourism. But then when we talk about sustainable development, basically, we tend to limit ourselves to the physical environment, but there's a cultural component in it. So when we're talking about someone's environment, it's also the culture, the tradition, the beliefs. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is a culture. It's in fact the springboard for everything. So it's the stronger the roots you have, so the higher you can. I will not say jump, but forward with more confidence and to achieve greater heights. On the passport again, as I was saying, so the issues. Our sister, the former deputy chief of staff, knows it far better than me. There are sovereignty issues, so many technical issues that, political issues which have been hindering it. I'm just giving a simple example. Even with us having the AU passport, traveling to some member states, still we need to apply for a visa. Even you have an AU passport, in one of the member states, I will not I will not mention the name. I've been waiting for over 1 hour with an AU passport. Then they told me, you have a Mauritius passport. You don't need a visa. You can just enter with a Mauritius passport. But I said, no, I'm traveling on official mission here. I will enter with my AU passport. It's just that because there were other colleagues with me. So it will not mean good that me, I just walk in and wait, my other colleagues wait. So even with the AU passport that you have, some member states have tacitly imposed that you need a visa, a return authorization. So that's a whole debate. It's Africa Day. Still, we are having that frank discussion. But again, I reiterate that it is beyond my powers, beyond my ambit to provide any answer to this, but also to say what the future looks like. So it's not that like having. We all want to have an integrated continent, and unless we have this free movement, which we have always been saying, doesn't mean unregulated movement, then honestly, without that, we'll not move forward. But let's see what the future will unfold in the future. But from our side, we keep reiterating the voices of the African citizenry to our policy makers, the policy organs of the African Union.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Raj. And thank you, Kezia, for moderating the Q&A and discussion session for us. I'm sure we could all go on this webinar celebration I feel it could have taken place over even 2-3 days, as we're just touching issues on the bare surface. Thank you very much for expounding on some of those issues. Nanda, I don't know if you are ready right now. We'll take about 3 minutes or so to just get some voices from the diaspora and what it means to be an African with an African identity in a foreign land. We'll take about 3 minutes, just a snippet of a film, and then Nanda will give us commentary. Thank you.
It's special, man. That's special.
Being African in New Zealand is sometimes challenging, but within that challenge, you can actually come out on top.
It depends on what stage you're at, whether you've just moved here or if you've been here a while. Because if you're more connected to others who are African, then you might express it more or feel more African. Whereas if you're more isolated, then being African in New Zealand is really lonely.
I love being different, and I think even as our African community has gotten bigger and bigger, we still are very unique.
Being an African person living here after 15 years, I found it very, let's say, wanting to be at the same level with my fellow brothers and sisters, communities that are hosting us, for them to know who I am and where I come from.
It's a blessing in disguise to an extent. Like when you first get here, it's like, what on earth is going on? But then as you actually, navigate different situations, you're able to apply being African to it, if that makes sense. I think there's just like a different type of resilience that we have as Africans. So it's like, it's never really that bad. It could be worse.
I have chosen not to let it offend me in any way, shape or form, but just to embrace it, And when you have that sort of power, then you're unstoppable, man.
Diversity is very important because then the communities here will look upon us and see us normal people, regardless of our skin, because they will understand that even though we look different, it's okay because we are all the same at the end of the day.
Diversity is about representation. So at Africa Day, there was heaps of Africans, but there was also heaps of European Kiwis, there was Asians, Indians, there was all different types of people at Africa Day, and it was really cool to see that mix.
That's such a massive question, man. It's a hard one to answer. Like it's like a platter, yeah? It's a spread of this, and this. It's probably also identifying the beauty in the difference, yeah?
So diversity for me literally just means being able to occupy a space full of different people and feel safe and at peace in that situation. And that's essentially what Africa Day was. We had people from all walks of life just vibing and dancing with each other. Like people that may never have even interacted with each other. And we had them dancing together. So that was awesome. That was definitely diversity for me.
Thank you so much, Mwanja. The African diaspora is a living thread that stretches across generations. I look at it as a testament to both the trauma of displacement and the victory of survival. And although scattered, Africans in the diaspora, they carry the heartbeat of the continent in their language, their music, and their resilience. And they are the archives of memory, they are the custodians of culture, and often they mirror back to us the strength and the beauty we sometimes forget we possess as Africans in Africa. And their stories remind us that Africa is not only bound by geography, it is a spirit. And in us honoring and recognizing the diaspora, we honor the resilience of our people and the unbreakable bond that ties all of us. inside and outside of the African continent together. And no matter where we are in the world, we know and understand that being African is not only a geography, it's a culture, and it is a connection. And I want us all to reflect on what it means to be African here at home in Africa. We are the heartbeat of Africa, the builders and the protectors and the dreamers. And it is up to us to keep that heartbeat and spirit alive. And this is a time where we should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to be African in Africa? What are we doing? Not just to celebrate who we are, but to shape the Africa that we want. Because Africa Month is not only about looking back, as my colleagues have articulated in different ways, it's about moving forward together. It's about celebrating our diversity as strength, not as division. It's about embracing our differences across borders, across ethnicities, across languages and different beliefs, and using them to build a stronger and more united communities. And too often, we wait for people outside of the continent, namely Europeans and Americans and etc., to define to us our value and to offer us solutions to our problems. But we already have what we need: our own knowledge systems, our own leaders in our own villages and communities, urban and rural. And we have our own culture. And most importantly, our own people, ordinary people, academics. They all have answers to what we need to invent and invest in an Africa that we want. And it's this Africa Month, I want us to recommit to uplifting our youth, who are the future of this continent, and supporting local knowledge and innovation, because the answers we seek are often already within our communities. We must commit to promoting unity, not just on paper, but in practice, across provinces and across countries and across differences. And above all, we must commit to telling our own stories with our own language, with pride, with power, with purpose, and with intention. And I want to encourage all of us to think deeply about our role in shaping Africa's next chapter. We're not just inheritors of this continent. The next generation is going to be assessing what we are doing now for our continent, because Africans nowadays, they are very passive. I'm sorry to say that, but there's a lot of talk and no action. So I want us to look at celebrations as this webinar as a stepping stone to action, not just talking all the time, but actually taking action in our everyday lives and our communities and wherever we reside, being intentional in our language, the way we speak our language, the way we teach children our language, the food we cook, being intentional about making sure we instill pride in our children, instilling pride in our siblings, and teaching people who are not Africans about our language and our food and all those things that make us Africans. So I want us to honor our culture, hold space for our differences, and move with pride and purpose towards a more just and united and peaceful Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Nande. And thank you for helping us screen that Afro-Kiwi film that was short, that was made a few years ago. Indeed, the film that we saw reminds us that African identity knows no borders. It's a vibrant testimony to belonging, culture, and power of self-determination. And Nande, it's as though you were at the event, the Africa Day event I was at last week Friday. I was actually commemorating Africa Day with another set of friends and stakeholders. And one of the key messages that I take away from that event actually resonates with what Nanda you've just said. Africa Day should not just be a commemoration or a celebration, but it should be a call to action. And yes, we can celebrate our past and our past achievements because our history makes us who we are. And indeed, let's enjoy our present, where we are today. But at the same time, let's not forget that we're building bridges for future generations, for those to come. So what it is that we do today should be enjoyment of our resources and what we have, but doing so sustainably in making sure that the bridges are there for the future generations to cross over and find an Africa that they'll be able to thrive in. Thank you very much, Nande. Kezia, I don't know if we can now have another musical rendition called Hey Africa by Wandile before we go to the closing segment of our celebration today. Thank you.
This next one is titled Hey Lord. Telun pamal Diyahluleka sonini Selinde wena qha sonini Kumnyama paphandle Can be seqamata Can be setata I know you've been waiting for my soul. Dilaba, magtetu bumnyama velugu kany. Magtetu bumnyama velugu kany. Titini wesomandla, kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Feel somandla kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Titini wesomandla kawuvele somandla kudala nsebenza akuveli oyini sonini cela uvele oyini didiniwe somandla kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Somandla ngicela uxolo kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Dityhafile somandla kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Somandla ngicela uxolo kamata. Hey Lord, can you hear me? Dityhafile somandla ngicela uxolo. Somandla ngicela uxolo. Xolele somandla, xolele sonini, undibizile. Undibizile. Thank you so much. My name is Wandile Mbambeni. Happy Africa Day.
Thank you, Wandile. That was a beautiful soul-stirring prayer wrapped in melody, a cry for healing, justice, and hope. On Africa Day, this song gives voice to generations who have endured and have overcome. It speaks to our collective longing for peace, dignity, and restoration. And in every note, there was a call to remember where we come from and envision where we're going. Hey Lord reminds us that while the struggle is real, so is the power of faith and togetherness. My job is almost done, but not quite. Dr. Elijah Masubelele, are you ready to give us some closing remarks before we hear from Lesedi with her final performance?
Thank you so much, Mwanja, for holding such a most important job this afternoon. And colleagues, as we conclude this enriching dialogue, we have had several powerful insights that obviously highlights the vital role that culture plays in shaping a just, inclusive, and transformed society. And by society, I mean the African society. We have heard from our panelists that reminded us that culture is not merely about tradition, it's actually a living. And culture, it's an evolving source of identity. It's an evolving source of belonging and continuity. So it holds the potential to restore our dignity, especially in societies healing from the legacies of colonialism, apartheid, and conflict. So we should not take that very lightly. We heard how Africa's cultural identity is being challenged by modernity, globalization, and generational shifts. Yet, in that tension lies the opportunity to redefine and reassert our values in ways that serve both young and old, urban and rural, local, global, and global communities as well. We heard from Ms. Banda's contribution, where we are reminded that the youth are not only culture bearers, but also culture creators. And their agency, creativity, and voices are crucial in shaping a future that honors heritage while embracing innovation. So it's important that the youth are engaged and involved in cultural practices. Now, as the IJR, we believe that sustainable transformation is not only a political